Salman, I find it really interesting because you say you don't believe in miracles, and you you also, admit that your recovery is miraculous. But also you say you don't believe in premonitions, and you did have something that we might call a premonition or a dream just before going to Chautauqua, just before going to make this speech. We've asked you to read just a little bit of that graph.
Yeah, I had a nightmare. 2 nights before I flew to Chautauqua, I had a dream about being attacked by a man with a spear, a gladiator in a Roman amphitheater. There was an audience roaring for blood. I was rolling about on the ground, trying to escape the gladiator's downward thrusts and screaming. It was not the first time I'd had such a dream. On 2 earlier occasions, as my dream self rolled frantically around, my actual sleeping self, also screaming, threw its body, my body, out of bed, and I awoke as I crashed painfully to the bedroom floor.
So those were those 2 times. This time your wife woke you up and you didn't crash to the floor, but you said to her, I don't want to go. Honestly, it gives me chills, that.
Yeah, I was very spooked by the dream. And that's what my initial response was, to say, look, I don't want to go. And then, I woke up a bit more and I thought, really, we don't run our lives on the basis of whether we had a bad dream or not. And it's just a dream. And of course I should go. But in retrospect, I'd have done well to pay attention to the dream.
And again, you don't believe in premonitions or foreshadowings, as you write. No. But why not?
Well, because you can rationalize these things. I knew that the place I was going to speak in was called an amphitheater. And we all know from movies and so on, what happens in amphitheaters and arenas in classical times is this kind of combat. So, and as I say, over the years, worrying about the attack on the satanic verses, I had dreams every so often about being attacked. And I'd learned to just deal with them. They're just kind of a traumatic dream. I don't have to believe them. This time, unfortunately, it came true.
Salman, you talk about the A, that is the assailant, the assassin, the ass, the asinine. You call him the A throughout. You don't use his name. You describe him as a murderous ghost from the past. And I found it really interesting that in the book, and in your life, you grappled with whether at some point, quite early on, before you even recovered, you were grappling with whether you should go to see him, confront him, talk to him, understand his motivation.
Yeah. That was my first thought, was as a kind of journalistic impulse to go and sit in a room with him and say, okay, tell me why you did it. And I was disabused of that. First of all, it seemed very improbable that his legal representation would agree to that. Eliza was very against it. And then, I read this story of Samuel Beckett, who was also stabbed in Paris in a street by a pimp. And he actually did go to the court and ask the man, why did you do it? And all the man said was, I don't know, sir, I'm sorry. And I thought, well, that doesn't get you very far, does it? It doesn't explain anything. And I thought maybe if I did meet this guy, I would get some banality of that kind. I didn't think I would get remorse. There doesn't seem to be any sign of remorse. But I thought I'd get some cliche. And so pointless. And I thought actually I would do better to use the skill I've got of imagination and storytelling to try and imagine myself into his head and work out a kind of coherent portrait of somebody who could have done this.
It's really interesting, that chapter. And I want to ask you, because I think we know, because the assailant gave an interview to one of the New York tabloids, that he didn't read the satanic verses. He didn't sound like he had any motivation for this.
Yeah, he didn't read. He said he'd read 2 pages of something I'd written. He didn't say what. And that he'd seen a couple of YouTube videos. And that was enough for him to decide to commit murder. It shows me that indoctrination can be a very powerful force. That there are people, like I suspect this young man of being, who kind of need to be led, who need to be given a direction in life because they don't feel that they have it. And something put the thought in his head, clearly he said he was an admirer of Khomeini and so on, so clearly he was thinking along those lines. And at some point, he heard about me giving a speech at Tshotokwa and decided that I was his target. It's kind of a mystery why it turned out to be me.
Yeah. And you divide the book into two distinct chapters, the chapter of hate and death and the chapter of life and love. And you talk a lot about, your wife, about your family. But writing about happiness, I like this little bit. You said, I've always been interested in writing about happiness, in large part because it's extremely difficult to do. And you quote a previous writer from yesteryear saying that it's like writing with white ink on a white page. So do you think you actually succeeded in writing about your happiness in the second half of the book?
Well, you tell me, Christian. I mean, I think I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you did.
For the reader to judge.
I think you did.
I think it's for the reader to judge. Thank you. Well. I mean, I think it was. We had. I mean, Eliza and I had been together for 5.5 years before the attack happened, and we had had a very happy life, and it was as if we were in a love story, and then somebody tried to turn that into a murder story, and then we worked very hard to turn it back into a love story. So it's I say in the book that, yes, we did manage, I think, to reconstruct our happiness, but it wasn't exactly the same as it had been. That there's a kind of shadow in it. There's what I describe it as a wounded happiness, but happiness nevertheless.
And you do talk about, a second chance at life. You really believe that. You're living it right now. And I wanted to ask you about your own, the country of your birth, India, where you set so many of your phenomenal books. You were very upset during the Satanic Verses crisis when you didn't get much love, even from your homeland. And then even after you were attacked, you say that there was pretty much silence, from your homeland.
Silence from official sources.
Yes.
I mean, I did get plenty of support from people, readers in India and writers in India. I got a lot of that, and I'm very grateful for it. But no, I was making the contrast between statements made by President Biden or President Macron or Boris Johnson, God bless him, but nothing from a kind of Indian official source. That was the contrast I was drawing.